What's up, guys? Jeff from Texas Moto Works, and I wanted to talk to you guys about fuel tanks on vintage motorcycles. If you're looking at buying a vintage bike, one of your first, if not your first question should be, what is the condition of the fuel tank? Now, you might say, well, shouldn't I ask them first about the carbs and how the bike runs? Yes and no. Fuel tank is more important. I just went through a situation on this 1000 Interceptor that I bought where the customer told me up and down how much he spent on having the carbs done. The bike ran great. And I don't doubt him. I don't think he was deceiving me on that. But what he didn't tell me, and what I failed to ask, was what does the inside of the fuel tank look like? Here's why this is important. You can have the cleanest carbs in the world, and a bad, rusty fuel tank is gonna wreck them. And I should know better. I've learned that lesson on my own, I'm embarrassed to say, probably about 5 times, to where I just looked inside the fuel tank. I didn't stick my scope in it. I didn't really dig in and look and clean the carbs like to surgical levels, and started it up and it ran great, and then it didn't run great. And the first few times it happened, I was just at a loss. I could not figure out what was going on. Well, the problem was there was sediment and garbage in the fuel tank that I couldn't see without a scope. With a scope, I would have been able to see it. But basically, rust is your main culprit. There can be other debris in there. But what the rust would do is slowly, it would start clogging up the pilots. And this guy, the seller, said, hey, it ran fine. He was very adamant about it. I rode it up onto the truck, this and that. And I don't doubt he did, but that was probably just the fuel in the float bowls that he was running through. And then the bike got here, and then it started running off the fuel tank, and boom, it doesn't run. And you can see behind me the bike, the tank is off it, and I have to pull the carbs today and go through all of them. And on a V4, they are no fun. It's not really the carbs themselves, cleaning the carbs out, it's the removal and reinstallation of them on a V4 is quite a chore. It's quite tricky. So definitely should be one of your, if not the first question, is what is the condition of the fuel tank? Have the seller send you a picture of the inside of the fuel tank. Usually if they're rusty or screwed up, you can see right in from the top looking down. But that's one thing. And another thing I wanted to go over is I've kind of changed a little bit of my method on cleaning fuel tanks, especially the ones that are really hard to get out of the bike, like the touring bikes. The touring bikes, they're in the frame, they're beneath you, you usually sit over them, and they are a lot of work to get out, to clean them conventionally with a degreaser and then an acid and then a treatment. I've really gotten away from doing the treatments just because I've had bad luck with some of them. Caswell's is great stuff if you have leaks. That stuff will form a plastic bladder inside. I had an RZ350 tank that took care of, it had a lot of holes in it. I think it might have been made in Switzerland because it was like Swiss cheese. But that's good stuff. The red coat's good stuff. The stuff to stay away from is the, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the name of it. I've used enough of it. It's silver. It's pretty common, but I've actually gotten away from using all of those, except if there's, like I said, if there's holes and whatnot. Really what I do now is I just degrease them, and then I run, if they're rusty, I run Evaporust. Evaporust is great stuff because it's non-toxic. You can use it over and over. I've actually got the tank for the Interceptor 1000 full of that stuff right now. But I'll do Evaporust, and if it's a tank that I can get off the bike, and even on the touring tanks that stay in the bike, I'll run an acid. The only thing is, with an acid on a touring bike, you're gonna have to flush it out really good, whereas on a tank that you can get out, you can flush it out, dump it, turn it over, and get it all out of there. It's a little trickier, but the acid is really good stuff. When I say acid, I'm talking about, I first learned about it from my auto detailing days. It's wheel acid. So it's typically like a hydrofluoric and sulfuric mixed and then diluted. And the silver stuff that I'm having a senile moment right now and not able to remember, they make a kit that actually has that as its second step. I get it generically in a 5 gallon tote of it. and rinse them out that way. But once you do that, once you degrease it or evaporust it, and then if the evaporust does good enough, I don't worry about doing the acid on it. But if there's still some leftover rust in there, I'll run the acid. The acid gets it all out. You just have to be way more diligent with that stuff because it's acid. So you gotta be careful with it. You gotta watch it. It won't ruin paint on contact, but if you let it sit on there for 30 seconds, yeah, it probably will. But once I do both of those, I don't do sealers anymore, because if you've got it clean enough, there's really no point in a sealer. I think the sealers are to cover stuff that maybe you can't remove, or if the tank's really rusty and even the acid won't knock the rust off on the inside, then you run a sealer to cover that stuff up. But like I said, I've just had some terrible experiences with the sealers, not the red coat and not the Caswells, but the other stuff, and basically had to remove that stuff. And that is not a story that you want to be in. You do not want to have be in a chapter of having to remove that stuff, because that is a bad story. It's very difficult to get it out. I had a Ducati tank that came to me. It was from somebody else did it, probably didn't prep it right, and I had to remove that stuff out of there, and it was not fun. I'll put up a graphic, because I'll figure out the name of the stuff that I'm talking about, put up a graphic so that you guys know what it is. But stay away from that stuff at all costs. Even prepping it like what I thought was the best prep job, it's still lifted. So anyway, so that's that. And then once they're clean, just get fuel in them quickly. Some guys will run 2-stroke oil in them just to knock down flash rust, because flash rust is a concern when it's drying out. Some guys will run a little bit of 2-stroke oil in it. Basically what I do, I blow it out, get it as dry as possible, and then I'll run some fuel with a stabilizer in the fuel on the inside of it. Either that, you can either do that, or you can do the 2-stroke oil thing. But take this all with a grain of salt, guys. It really depends on what kind of tank you're working with and how bad it is. I'm just kind of sharing with you what I've gone through recently with doing tanks, and it's been really successful. I've started doing a lot of touring bikes. The first bike that I did, the touring bike, it was a Suzuki Cavalcade, and I took that tank out, and that was an absolute nightmare. I had to pull the shaft drive and the rear wheel and the rear fender and all that stuff and get that tank out. And then I did a Voyager where I just did the evaporust and then rinsed it on the bike. And that one, actually, with the tank being in the bike, I did acid wash that one. But not every tank's gonna need that. Buy yourself a scope. The scopes are great because you can get a scope inside of it and get them at Harbor Freight and really take a look at what's going on in there. So anyway, so that's that. And yes, if you're asking, that is a Schwinn Stingray bicycle. I had one I got one for my birthday when I was 7 years old. Came across that one. It's been fully restored. I know it's blurry right now because I'm on portrait mode, but that is fully restored. The seat for it is actually drying on the workbench back there. I got a new seat cover on it that I did. That I'll be shooting a video about that if you guys are into old Schwinns, which I am. So anyway, all right, guys, thanks for watching. If you haven't, you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe to this. That would be great. I would appreciate it. And we'll see you on the other side. Thank you so much.